So guys, I'm CJ Dupree. I'm here with Crimson Tide, driven by NASCAR.
This is what being a NASCAR fan is all about. Singular history and tradition.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. This is so special.
Unmatched on-track intensity.
We gotta go.
And triple-header playoffs action to ratchet up the stakes. Throw in a can't-miss concert, camping, and the legendary atmosphere of Talladega Boulevard. And you've got more than a race. You've got Talladega. Get your tickets now at TalladegaSuperspeedway.com.
Roll Tide and welcome to this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. This is Roger Hoover. Great to be with you in our Tuscaloosa studios as we are still working during Alabama's open week. No football game this weekend for the Alabama Crimson Tide before resting up and getting ready for the Georgia Bulldogs on September 28th, but still plenty to talk about both with football, NASCAR, and basketball coming up on today's show. We'll go through our headlines plus everything coming up on the show thanks to our friends RJ Young. RJ Young is the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. They've given us this smart board to go through everything in a real interactive way throughout the show. We'll start with Christian Miller, of course, a former Alabama linebacker and one of our analysts on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. You can hear him following every game on the Everwood Crimson Tide post-game party with Gray Robertson. We'll get his thoughts on Alabama through the first 3 games of the season and what's coming ahead as he'll even look ahead to the Georgia matchup. So Alabama football thoughts from Christian Miller as well as from Larry McReynolds, a lifelong Alabama football fan. Of course, a legendary run as a crew chief in NASCAR and a longtime NASCAR broadcaster. He'll join us to talk not just about the Crimson Tide, and he's prepared once again with stats. We'll have Larry McReynolds join the show, not only to talk Alabama football, but give us an update on the NASCAR playoffs as they head to my backyard, Bristol, coming up this weekend for the night race in the playoffs. Then we'll talk some basketball with Nate Oats. We were just in his backyard, Wisconsin. Of course, Nate Oats was at the ball game for Alabama against Wisconsin this past Saturday, and yes, we'll talk a little bit about that with Coach Oats, but most importantly, we'll talk about this men's basketball team, fresh off a Final Four run from a year ago. He's excited about what this group can do, possibly a preseason #1 team. Nate Oats on our Hey Coach replay will be coming up to round out the show. Looking at our headlines with that Crimson Tide football team, of course, the offensive line, great performance, kind of everybody healthy, really everybody in the spot they should be in. Caden Proctor at left tackle, Tyler Booker at left guard, Parker Brailsford at center, the right guard, Jaden Roberts, and then right tackle, Elijah Pritchett. All of those guys in place for the Wisconsin game, and as a result, the Outland Trophy gave them the weekly offensive line honors of the week, so great to see that for the offensive line. We don't talk enough about James Burnip. He was terrific against Wisconsin, even had a 64-yard punt in that game, so he was named the Ray Guy Award Weekly Punter of the Week. Now, as I mentioned, this Saturday, an open date for the Crimson Tide. If you missed it last night on Hey Coach and the Kalen DeBoer Show, Coach DeBoer phoned in to Baumhauers and talked about everything going on for Alabama during this open week, how they can get better and get ready for the Georgia Bulldogs. It'll be a top 5 matchup, no matter what the rankings say, coming up next week, as Georgia's currently #2, Alabama currently #4. That could obviously change if anything happens above or below these teams, but it's going to be an outstanding atmosphere. Alabama against Georgia. 6:30 is the start time. Don't forget our radio coverage will start at 3:30 coming up across the network. A few other notes around Crimson Tide athletics. Victory for the women's golf team. Earlier this week, they won the UAB Hoover Invitational at Hoover Country Club. The Crimson Reserve era is off to a good start. Already the men's golf team has won a team championship, and now the women's golf team has won a team championship since that event opened. A terrific start to the year from Mick Potter and the women's golf team. Soccer team, tonight, SEC play starts, yes, at Texas. The Longhorns now in the SEC, and this is a really good soccer program. Texas won the Big 12 a year ago. They consistently have one of the top programs in women's college soccer. So great matchup for Alabama against Texas coming up tonight. Don't forget Alabama's home SEC opener comes your way Sunday when Alabama takes on the Tennessee Lady Vols here in Tuscaloosa. The volleyball team actually fell to UNA last night by 3 sets, but the Crimson Tide will try and bounce back coming up this week against Florida State. That'll be the matchup coming up at 2 o'clock. Alabama against FSU coming up at Foster Auditorium. Christian Miller does a great job for us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network, breaking down Alabama football post-game as part of our radio coverage. You can also hear him every day on our flagship station in Tuscaloosa, Tide 100.9 with the Miller's Edge, and he joins us 3 games into the season to break down what we've seen so far from the Crimson Tide.
Christian, it's great to see you. Roll Tide. Crimson Tide, 3-0. That's a good spot to be in so far this year.
Most definitely good to see Roger roll tide. But yeah, man, I've been really pleased with what I saw. Kicking things off week one, a big victory over Western Kentucky. Getting to see how explosive this offense is. That was one thing. I was looking forward to seeing how Coach DeBoer and his offensive scheme would translate here in Tuscaloosa with all these weapons. And so far, we've seen a lot of great things. I mean, you want to talk about Ryan Williams, a phenomenal freshman. We've heard so many things about him. Watching him in fall camp, I was really impressed by his ability at the age of 17, but I still was like, I'd love to see that translate to the season. And so far through 3 games, I mean, the kid has been, absolutely phenomenal. I had the luxury of playing with guys like Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, Devontae Smith, guys from both eras during Coach Saban's tenure, some really good talent. And he looks to be on pace to have that type of career. I know it's still early, but he's definitely setting the bar high for his ability in his career here in Tuscaloosa. But overall, just really pleased with what I've seen defensively. I'm a defensive guy. Being able to see this new scheme under Kane Womack, they call it a swarm defense. We've seen just that, right? These guys have been swarming to the football. There's a lot of pursuit, a lot of team speed. I love seeing the linebackers fly around. I got to talk to Jahad Campbell and Deontay Lawson, before the season started. And that was one thing they told me, that they feel like this system's built for linebackers. There's been a lot of good play out of those guys. Even a guy like Justin Jefferson, who's finally able to crack that rotation. He's really displayed what he can do on the football field. Up front, LT Overton has been a force. Pass rush ability, we saw that during fall camp, but he's displaying that through 3 games. Tim Smith, Tim Keenan, those guys are picking up where they left off last season. The back end, you've got Keon Sapp, a new addition in the secondary, who's been phenomenal, a ball hawk. He's been aggressive coming down, making tackles along with Malachi Moore. Both those guys are great. In the cornerback spots, you got a young guy over there, but so far Xavier Brown's been playing well. And the transfer to Monty Jackson, he's done some nice things as well. So, I think, through 3 games, you look at this like a first quarter report, right? The first quarter of the season, you got 12 regular season games. So far, I would give them a solid grade. They've done a lot of good things, just like anybody else. There's some things they could clean up, be a little more consistent in a couple areas. But so far, I think they've really impressed. And I think they've probably exceeded a lot of people's expectations, having a new coach, having a new staff. This is a new era in Tuscaloosa. But so far, the Crimson Tide seem to look pretty familiar through 3 games.
Looking at your specialty, the defensive side of the ball, what's made this defense so good in just limiting opponents' ability to score? Obviously, the shutout win against Western Kentucky, but then only 2 touchdowns allowed, just one per game to South Florida and Wisconsin. What's made this team so good in the red zone, either forcing field goals or just making sure teams don't score at all?
That's a really good point, Roger. I would say their red zone efficiency, their ability to come up with stops. We saw that in the USF game a couple times. Western Kentucky, they're putting some spots, having to defend that area, and they did a nice job either forcing field goals or forcing no points at all. Sometimes the teams elected to go for it, but I would say between that, the red zone defense and their ability to force turnovers, right? I mean, 4 turnovers last week against Wisconsin on the road, right? I mean, they just were going after the football. Deontay Lawson strips one out. Malachi Moore puts his pads and his helmet on the football, popping it out. LT Overton, Hugh Robinson, both coming up with big strip sacks. Those types of plays, they get the ball back to the offense, and it keeps the ball away from the other offense, right? So I would say they've been doing a really nice job with that. And then we see why it's called a swarm D. It's fast, it's physical, they're flying around, they play with a lot of pursuit. And so those are things that need to continue throughout the course of the season, right? Because those will matter in these big games, right? When it comes down to these close matchups, who wins that turnover battle? So far, Alabama's done a nice job protecting the football and done a really nice job for forcing turnovers. So if they can continue that, they're going to set themselves up nicely in the future.
And how about the play of the big guys up front? I've loved seeing the starts of the year that the Tims have had, both Tim Keenan and Tim Smith. And then maybe it's just because he's wearing number 22, but I love seeing LT Overton fly into the backfield, get some sacks and tackles for a loss.
Yeah, Roger, they've been phenomenal, man. They've been very aggressive up front. We're seeing them penetrate, right? We're seeing them control the line of scrimmage. Both Tims have been outstanding so far, really dominating that line of scrimmage. LT Overton, you mentioned him. There was so much buzz around him during fall camp. His ability just to make plays. He just always flashed. Every time I was up there, he jumps out, right? And he's been doing that through 3 games, both against the run and the pass, right? For a guy to be pushing 280 pounds and to move like that, Roger, that's scary. Kane Womack talked about him. And he said, when you've got 2 of those guys, not just one, because he threw in Jermaine Latham as well. He's a very similar type player. Those guys with their versatility, that's the defensive coordinator's dream, right? Because he can line up on the edge. He can beat tackles on the edge with his speed and athleticism. He converts it to power when necessary. When you go in those sub packages and you want more speed on the field, you take some of those bigger guys out, you slide him inside and let him work with the speed guys on the edge, Quay Russaw, Q Robinson. and it's a lethal combo. So I've really liked what I've seen. There's a lot of, experience up front with the defensive line. There's a lot of versatility. And there's a lot of athleticism and balance with that group, man. And they have a lot of guys, right? They can roll. We see a lot of rotations. We even saw the young Deontay Pierre get in on the edge this past week, and he was effective. So when you have a group like that, we call it fresh legs, right? Because you want fresh legs getting after the quarterback and being in the football game. You can do that when you have depth like that. So I've been very pleased with that.
Going back to the offensive side of the ball, you talked about Ryan Williams, and I think we were all really impressed week one when he had, of course, those two great touchdowns, broke some tackles in the second one. But he's really shown the last couple of games, Christian, that he's not just a home run type of hitter in terms of long plays downfield. Do you like the fact that Jalen has really had him as a go-to guy, intermediate short passing game as well?
Absolutely. That was one thing I was wondering about it when we did see those deep shots. I'm like, I want to see him kind of, run some other routes, get into some of those other route trees. And we've been starting to see that. And to me, that's just so impressive for a guy that's only 17 years old. I mean, I always joke about it. Like, I didn't even know if the guy had his driver's license yet. Like, can he even drive to practice, or does he need rides? I guess he got the bus service, but I'm just kidding. But no, he's been phenomenal, right? And anytime your quarterback has a weapon like that, it makes their job so much easier. I mean, it reminds me of, when Blake Sims had Amari Cooper. He just had a go-to guy, right? He can always find him and know, hey, this guy has a chance to make a play. You need a receiver like that. And that was one of the questions going into this year, right? Who is going to be that guy to step up? It kind of reminded me of a situation a couple of years ago, in the receiver room, who was going to be that lead guy. And so far, a lot of people were saying, hey, it should be Ryan Williams, but me personally, with my experience, I know it's difficult to come from high school and to have that translate to college. So far, he's exceeded my expectations, and he's stepped up. And another guy, Jeremy Bernard, both of those guys have been phenomenal for Jalen Milroe. And those connections are going to grow throughout the season. Kobe Prentice, Kendrick Law, those guys are doing a nice job. And I'll tell you one area about the receivers that is kind of going unnoticed is their blocking ability. Roger, if you go back and watch the tape, Kendrick Law and some of these other receivers, man, they were just mauling guys against Wisconsin in the run game. And that is so critical. It's something that doesn't get talked about enough about receivers. But when you have to block downfield, that's how those explosive runs, whether it's jam, Milroe keeping the ball, that's how those go from a 15-yard gain to a 30-plus or a touchdown run. And so those guys have been excelling in that area too. And that's one thing I wanted to give them credit for, that they've been blocking their tails off. And that definitely helps an offense out tremendously.
Then how about Jalen Milroe? Before the season, you had a great exclusive conversation with him on the Miller's Edge. What have you enjoyed getting to know more about him? And then so far through 3 games, he's just not making mistakes, and that's been huge for this football team.
Man, I love the guy, man. He's just so respectable. He's humble. He puts his head down. He works. He's a phenomenal leader. Named captain again. I mean, this guy, he gets it, right? I mean, even just little comments like, hey, telling former players, hey, thanks for all that you guys did, so now we can, capitalize on NIL. Little stuff like that. I was like, I wasn't expecting that, but hey, you're welcome, man. You deserve it, right? And like Lank all the way. But no, he's been great, Roger. I mean, he looks so much more comfortable and confident in the pocket, the way he's delivering the football. I mean, I thought last week against Wisconsin, those were some NFL type throws. I mean, dropping the ball in the basket to Ryan Williams early on, and then I think it was like a 2-play drive in like 17 seconds, hitting Jeremy Bernard over the top. I mean, like those types of throws are incredible, man. And it just shows that all the work that he's put in has really paid off. It's paying dividends for him. And then now to have this new system, you're working with Coach DeBoer, Nick Sheridan, guys that have experience working with the guy Michael Penix and developing him. I think we're starting to see how that connection is flourishing, right? I think Jalen is really taking that next step that we were looking to see him take from last season. And they're even incorporating his athletic ability more, with the quarterback design runs, whether it's quarterback draw, quarterback power. And that really keeps the defense on its toes. It's almost like, hey, pick your poison, right? I mean, you got a quarterback that can go run the football down your throat for 30-plus yards. Oh, next thing you know, he's throwing it over the top, hitting you deep for 30-plus yards. So he, in my opinion, is probably one of the most dynamic players, if not the most dynamic player in college football. And I love, being around him. His energy is infectious. Again, a great leader, great person, and a phenomenal football player. And I'm glad to have him at the University of Alabama.
It's now an open date this week for the Crimson Tide. Then next week, all we're going to be doing, and you're going to be talking about it every day on Tide 109, is getting ready for Alabama against Georgia. There's a lot that's similar for both of these teams, Christian, from last year's SEC championship. There's a lot that's changed from last year's SEC championship game for both of these programs. Do you still feel like when they're under the lights at Saban Field, is it still going to be kind of a normal Alabama versus Georgia heavyweight fight, or what kind of game could we be in for coming up next Saturday?
Good question, man. I think a lot of people are waiting to figure that out. I keep trying to play it in my head, right? Because, typically we mirror each other so much. Kirby Smart is pretty much the same defense, right? They just might have a couple nuances. But now you've got a swarm defense with Kane Womack, so that's going to look different. We've talked about that, kind of some of those differences there. But the offense, to me, that's what I'm looking forward to seeing. How does this offense match up with this Georgia defense? And the reason I say that, Rogers, I've always understood our defense to, hey, we're very complex. We have a lot of adjustments, but when we face teams that run similar offenses to what Coach DeBoer likes to run, with a lot of movement, personnel changes, a lot of window dressing, it always caused issues for us. And I can see that being the case when we take on Georgia. I can see a lot of the things that Coach DeBoer likes to do causing some issues for Georgia when they're trying to make their adjustments and shifts. So I think that could definitely benefit us, because that's something different to them, right? Plus, with our defense being so different now, they have to go back and say, hey, we got to watch South Alabama tape, right? Like, that's what we used to do when we would face a new coordinator. If he wasn't in the league, right, we'd have to go watch tape from other teams, or we'd watch the limited sample size. They only got 3 games. And according to Kane Womack, he said, hey, we've only showed a little bit of sample size. So this is going to be an interesting game. At the end of the day, Roger, you got 2 very talented teams, number 1, number 2 recruiting classes year in, year out. Right. It's going to be a dogfight. We know that. I think ultimately, even with all those factors I mentioned, it's going to come down to who wants it more, right? Who's going to, deliver that final blow, because we're going to take some hits. How do we respond? Right. We got tested in USF. That was some good experience, but this is going to be a heavyweight matchup. This is going to be the toughest challenge yet. So I'm going to be looking at how we respond when things might not go our way, because they've got good players. They're going to make big plays. How do we respond? And at the end of the day, we are in Bryant-Denny Stadium, right? The fans have to be a factor, right? They need to be as loud as possible. They need to try to, encourage some of those penalties on their end, make them have false starts, make them have some undisciplined penalties, because that goes a long way. I don't think people realize that, but the fans are huge in this matchup to me. I mean, that could be a deciding factor. You never know. So I'm excited for it. I know everybody is. I know they haven't announced game day. More than likely, game day will probably be here. I mean, it's under the lights. This is why you sign up to play at Alabama. So I can't wait for it, Roger. I feel confident going into it. I've been watching Georgia. Obviously, I've been scouting us. I like the matchup. And as long as we play our A game and we don't beat ourselves, I think we have a really good shot at handing the Bulldogs another loss, right? I mean, you look at the record now, I think they've only got us maybe 1 out of the last, like 6 or so times. So they're going to be eager for this game, but we are just as eager, and I can't wait for it.
Can't wait either. Well, Christian Miller will get ready for the ball game by listening to you and your dad on Tide 100.9 throughout the week. And then after the ball game's over, you and Gray Robertson do a great job with the Everwood Crimson Tide post-game party for us here on the network. So just thank you for your time with us this week on Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. Enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you again down the road. Roll Tide, Christian.
Yes, sir. Roll Tide, Roger.
Time is running out to secure your seat at NASCAR's biggest and baddest track. This October 4th through the 6th, the NASCAR playoffs will make their long-awaited return to Talladega Superspeedway, where the only thing bigger than the action on the track is the unrivaled fan experience. Don't miss out on a 3-race weekend full of playoff action that will have you on the edge of your seat all race long. Get your tickets now for Talladega Playoffs Event Weekend, October 4th through the 6th at TalladegaSuperspeedway.com. Fun conversation with Christian Miller. And speaking of fun, getting ready for that Georgia game coming up on September 28th. Hello, Lauren Elena. She'll be in Tuscaloosa performing at Vector Security Champions Lane before Alabama takes on Georgia. We look forward to seeing her, plus all the great guests we're going to have in our Champions Lane concert series coming up this year. Jake Matthew along for the South Carolina game. Easton Corbin coming up at the end of the month as well against Missouri, and then Jake Matthew. Smith Distillery coming up in the games in November. But Lauren Elena, really the headliner of the year for us at Vector Security Champions Lane. Make sure you catch her coming up before Alabama takes on Georgia. She is an Alabama football fan, even though she's from the state of Georgia. Somebody that's from the state of Alabama and is a lifelong Crimson Tide fan, Larry McReynolds, a longtime NASCAR broadcaster. Before that, he was a very successful crew chief, was the winning crew chief with Dale Earnhardt for the 1998 Daytona 500. He is somebody that absolutely loves Crimson Tide football. We caught up with him in the spring, and we kind of floated it back in the spring. Hey, Larry Mack, would you like to join us during the season to talk about Crimson Tide football? He said yes. We hope to have him on once a month all throughout this football season. Here is a conversation not just about Alabama football, but a NASCAR playoff update as well with NASCAR legend Larry McReynolds.
We're in Alabama's open date of the season, so it's a good time to reflect on the 3 games we've seen so far, plus take a look ahead and also talk some NASCAR with our good friend Larry McReynolds, a great fan of the Alabama Crimson Tide and, of course, a longtime NASCAR analyst in addition to his work before as a pit crew member and crew chief. And Larry, Roll Tide, it is great to have you on the show. We did this back in the spring, but it's great to have you with us during football season. How's everything going for you?
Well, I love this time of year. As we talked about football season, college football, we're well underway. Of course, our Crimson Tide, they've started off great, 3-0 before this off weekend. And if it's football season, college football season, that means it's playoff time for NASCAR for the Cup Series. So we're headed to Bristol, which means that's the cutoff race for this first round. So love this time of year for sure.
Let's start with some Crimson Tide football talk. We talked before in the spring about the transition from Coach Saban to Kalen DeBoer. Now we've gotten to see it in game-like settings. What have you made of this Alabama team through the first 3 weeks?
Well, I probably was more excited about the win at Wisconsin on the road, 42-10. You know, anytime you go to a college like Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, and play away, we know that's a tough environment. It's just like when a team comes to Tuscaloosa. But to know that our offense in 3 games have scored almost 150 points, our defense have held these first 3 teams to 26 points. And what I liked about the Wisconsin game, I felt like we cleaned up some stuff. We cleaned up some mistakes. If I go back to the first 2 games with Western Kentucky and South Florida at home in Tuscaloosa, I saw a lot of mistakes, a lot of penalties. That's something I felt like that plagued us last year. And quite honestly, I thought it contributed to the loss to Texas last year was all those false start penalties. And I think I was right in saying at Wisconsin this past weekend, we only had 3 penalties the entire game and 2 for false starts. So that's something we needed to clean up, and it looks like we did.
And great to see that offensive line against Wisconsin as well. It kind of looked like the version of the offensive line that we thought we were getting all fall camp.
No, I think we're playing good football now, especially at Wisconsin on both sides of the football. I'm glad we've got this off week. You know, we got beat up a little bit at Wisconsin, most notably Malachi Moore on the defense got hurt. Hopefully he'll be healthy when Georgia comes to town in 2 weeks. But I felt like special teams, offense, defense, running the football, passing the football. You never have a perfect football game, and I'm sure Coach DeBoer will tell you that. But I felt like that game against Wisconsin was pretty darn solid.
Great win for the Crimson Tide. Alabama now 3-0 on the season. We have the open date this week, and then Larry, it's Alabama against Georgia. Even though it's the first SEC game, and maybe with the 12-team playoff, there's more margin for error, but it's still going to have that huge game feeling once we're back at Saban Field on September 28th.
Well, we know every game is different, but I was pretty shocked and surprised how close Kentucky played Georgia. They showed that they are vulnerable, especially playing on the road. A 1-point win over Kentucky at Kentucky. So to me, that's a good sign. But the one thing that I feel strongly about is we can't start late against Georgia. We're going to have to jump on them early. We can't do what we did against South Florida. That will not work against Georgia because we know they're going to come out with guns a-blazing. We're going to have to jump on them hard early on offense. We're going to have to stop them on defense, and hopefully the crowd there in Tuscaloosa will play a role in that.
Have you liked this defense so far, especially been able to force some fumbles? We saw a couple interceptions by Keon Sabb in the first game.
Well, as I mentioned, 26 points combined against 3 teams. And I'm going to tell you, South Florida is not a bad football team. I think they get very underestimated when they come to town and play. but I feel like we're doing a good job of defending against the run. We're defending against the pass, but that's what they're going to have to do. Carson Beck, we know how dangerous that quarterback for Georgia can be, and it's going to take this defense. I always say, I've said it for years, when it comes to a college football team or really any football team, the offense scores the points, the defense wins the game.
They certainly do. And to tie this discussion back to NASCAR for just a moment, again, a huge transition in Alabama football going from Coach Saban to Kalen DeBoer. Looking back your NASCAR career, just the time you've been around motor racing, can you think of a similar situation, whether it was a long-term driver that retired or maybe a crew chief, someone that had been in a role like you had, or just a team had to go through a bit of a change like what Alabama's having to go through this year? Any notable examples stick out in your mind?
Well, I've probably seen it for a number of years in many regards, but probably one that comes to mind would be Jeff Gordon and Ray Evernham. You know, they were paired together for 1993, and when you look at the races they won, the championships they won together, I mean, they had several seasons where they had double-digit wins. But then Ray decided to make the move to Dodge and form Evernham Racing. And, you know, Robbie Loomis stepped in. There were several crew chiefs that Jeff went through. He obviously won a championship with Robbie Loomis, but I'm not sure we ever saw the magic that Ray and Jeff had. I could maybe even relate it to Jimmy Johnson and Chad Canals. When you look at all the races they won together, the 7 championships, you know, they just finally, I think, kind of fizzled out. But I think that's a little bit of an artificial move because I think Jimmy was on the backside of his career. But probably the one that came to mind as you were asking me was the Jeff Gordon, Ray Evernham, all the success they had together. And Ray obviously went on to have success as an owner, and Jeff went on to have success winning another championship. But yeah, I think we've seen it several times.
That certainly is interesting. And then getting it to NASCAR today, what have you liked about the last few weeks and some of the racing action we've seen? As you mentioned, the playoff cutoff point is coming at Bristol, and it remains an extremely tight race.
I don't know that I've seen anything like this, but I think this first round has created this. We've never had a first round like Atlanta, a 1.5-mile super speedway. We just came off of a road course race at Watkins Glen. Watkins Glen has never been in the playoffs. We've only actually had one road course in the playoffs with Charlotte Roval. And now we're going to a short track at Bristol where, based on the spring race, tire wear was the big story. And Goodyear, NASCAR, with some feedback from drivers, has decided to bring this same tire combination we ran there in the spring back there for this weekend. But it's almost been like it's not been the fastest cars that's been prevailing. When you look at our 16 drivers and 16 teams, both the Atlanta race and Watkins Glen, of the 16, 10 to 12 had some type of an issue, a penalty, or mistake. And that has cost them. That's what's got this so tight. Yeah, you've got Joey Logano that's locked in based on his win at Atlanta, but you've got like all these drivers right around the cut line. You got Chase Briscoe, Ty Gibbs, Denny Hamlin, Brad Keselowski, Martin Truex Jr., separated by 14 points headed to Bristol. So every stage point is going to be important at Bristol, and finishing just as high as you can. You think about it, Kyle Larson is just 26 points above the cut line. Denny Hamlin is 6 points below. I'm sure a lot of other people's bracket jives with mine. I had both those drivers going to the championship forward. I'm sure a lot of people had one or the other, maybe as the championship favorite. I don't know that we've ever seen it this tight headed into the cutoff race of round number 1 like we're seeing this year.
Does that speak to just the talent of the drivers that are in the mix right now? Maybe the model of the car being so similar across the board? Or where do you think that falls?
I think it's a combination. I think it's this car. We're in our 3rd year of this Gen 7 car. Just the win column alone speaks for itself. We have had 16 different winners in the first 28 races. Now, that also includes Austin Dillon and Chris Buescher, who just won at Watkins Glen. That's not in the playoffs. I would not be a bit surprised in these final 8 races to see another new winner. Think about it. Kyle Busch, he's still not won this year. Martin Truex Jr., that's in the playoffs, He's not won this year. So I think we could end up with 17 or 18 winners this year. But I think it goes back to what I also said. It's drivers and teams making mistakes. That is what has kept this so tight as we head to Bristol. Normally by now, even after 2 races, we have a couple of drivers that's already in a must-win situation. We don't have it. Harrison Burton, it's a vertical mountain for that 21 car. 20 points below the cut line, would have to leapfrog 5 drivers to get above the cut line. But you cannot even say he is in a must-win situation. Nobody really is right now.
Of course, the playoffs will continue. You mentioned Bristol coming up this weekend. And then in a few weeks, NASCAR action is returning here to Alabama to Talladega for what should be a fantastic weekend of racing coming up October 4th through the 6th. For fans that may be on the fence or haven't been to Talladega before, what would you tell them about the experience and what makes Talladega really stand out from the rest of the tracks in NASCAR?
There's no other track like it. The closest thing would be its sister track, Daytona International Speedway. But at Talladega, it's not unusual for us to have 40, 50 plus lead changes. And lead changes are only officially monitored at the start finish line. We'll have a lot more than that around the rest of the racetrack. But the bottom line is we're going to go there 36, 37, 38 drivers or teams, just like Daytona a few weeks ago. Every driver in that field, whether you're a playoff driver or a non-playoff driver, you feel like if you stay out of trouble, that you can win this race. I've always said it. At Talladega, like Daytona, if you're in it, you can win it. And there's a good chance we're going to go 188 laps, 500 miles, and we're probably not going to know who's going to win this thing till they come off turn 4, headed through the tri-oval with the checkered flag waving. Check that. We're probably not going to know who's going to win it till they go through the tri-oval, headed down to the start finish line with a checkered flag waving. It's such an unknown, and it's such a wild card race. They're going to be 3 wide, maybe 4 wide, 6, 7, 8 rows deep, and you'll see that this entire race.
With all that in mind, going back to your experience as a crew chief, what would give you more anxiety going into a race? A track like Daytona, Talladega, or a short track like Bristol that's coming up this weekend?
Both would give me anxiety, but for different reasons. Because at a short track like Bristol this weekend, even going back to Watkins Glen, or think about Kansas that kicks off the round of 12 before we head to Talladega, I knew that if a caution came out, I was going to have a decision to make. Do I pit? Do I stay out for track position? Do I think about 2 tires, 4 tires? Talladega gave me anxiety for a completely different reason. It's because once you know you make your final pit stop and you do not have to come back to pit road, you're good to go on fuel. Normally it's about fuel at Talladega. Fresh tires don't do you a whole lot. You almost become a race fan sitting on that pit box. You know it's up to your driver. It's up to the spotter that's taking care of that driver. And at Talladega, you can have the fastest car. You can have the best handling car. You can have perfect pit stops. Everything can be perfect for you, but you know that the outcome of your day, your destiny, is probably going to come down to what a driver in the field makes, a choice he makes, or maybe your driver makes a good decision or a bad decision that will either make your day go really good or go really bad.
Talking NASCAR and Alabama football, Larry McReynolds. Larry, of course, we know NASCAR, the playoffs are going to keep you busy over the next few weeks, but are you going to have a chance to come here to Tuscaloosa, maybe catch the Tide on the road coming up soon?
Well, I would love to. It's probably going to be after the NASCAR season, because even though we don't have the races right now, there's still a lot of things going on with Fox. I work with the local Fox affiliate here doing things for them over the weekend. But once we clear NASCAR, you better believe I'm going to try to get down there to Tuscaloosa. Or I'm not going to say if we make the playoffs, but when we make the playoffs, hopefully we'll get to one of those playoff games. You know, it's amazing, this SEC right now. I heard the guys this past Saturday on College Game Day. They said, and Nick Saban is again part of that and doing a phenomenal job. We miss him as our coach, but what a phenomenal job he's doing on College Game Day. He said it, those guys said it, Herb Street. They would not be a bit surprised to see 4, 5, maybe up to 6 SEC teams in the playoffs. And I think you just look at what's going on right now in the SEC. I don't think I'd be a bit surprised either.
No, I think they'd be some of the last teams standing. Well, Larry McReynolds, great to catch up with you. Hope to do this again down the road, maybe as the NASCAR playoffs come to a close. But thank you for all the time you've given us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Thank you for your time. Roll Tide.
No, I love catching up with you guys, talking Crimson Tide. I tell people all the time, they go, what do you enjoy in life? I said, look, there's 4 things in my life. There's God, there's my family, there's NASCAR, and there's Crimson Tide football. Outside of that, I don't venture too far out, and Roll Tide.
This is what being a NASCAR fan is all about.
Gets the win at Talladega.
Singular history and tradition. And triple header playoffs action to ratchet up the stakes. Get your tickets now at TalladegaSuperspeedway.com.
Well, last night we had a great time at Baumhower's Victory Grill here in Tuscaloosa for Hey Coach and the Kalen DeBoer Show. If you missed it, it is available to watch on demand. Kalen DeBoer called into the show since he's busy at work during Alabama's open date, but he'll be back at the restaurant next week getting ready for the Georgia matchup. We talked a little bit of basketball on the show as well. Kelly Curry, the assistant coach for Alabama women's basketball, was there along with women's basketball sophomore Essence Cody, talking about what the Crimson Tide have coming up in women's basketball this year. And then Chris Stewart had a lot of fun catching up with Nate Oats. The last time he was at Hey Coach, he had the Final Four trophy, the regional championship trophy, on stage at Baumhower's last night. He was alongside Chris Stewart giving an update on Crimson Tide men's basketball. Latrell Reitzel Jr. was also on stage for a time as well. So we wanted to take a look back to our Hey Coach replay from last night and hear from the head coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide, Nate Oats.
Good to see you. How's everything?
Going good. It's good to be here. It has been a while. We talking football? Georgia, is it? I'm on because it's a bye game. We can't talk Georgia football yet, or what?
Look, we'll talk whatever you want to talk. But in fact, if you want to go football, I'll ask you, for the Wisconsin boy, what was it like to step into Lambeau for the first time? Because I'm from Alabama, and it was my first trip into Lambeau this past weekend as well. So that's the only thing I got in common as far as Lambeau and you and me is concerned.
I didn't even know you went. You were there too?
I was. I was a guy wearing a cheese head. You didn't see me?
You had a cheese head on?
No, I didn't do that.
You should have put one on.
Couldn't look any worse.
Josh Jacobs, Roll Tide, Go Pack, Go.
Yeah, he played great.
Gave him the ball a bunch, delivered for us. That was good. That was my first game at Lambeau. I've been a Packers fan pretty much my whole life. I'd never been to a game at Lambeau, so it was fun. We went 2-0 that weekend. Bama got one, Packers got one.
It was a really good weekend for you to go home, see a lot of people like you did, but not just going home, Coach. You're going home as the man that took Alabama to a Final Four. And we've talked about it. It's been a few years. But again, those guys, those family members remember you as a kid. They remember you as the high school coach. And now you're a Final Four coach. That's really special.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. My sister, brother-in-law, nephew, niece, and my dad all came to the Wisconsin game, so it was cool to see them there. But I saw a few people I know. I don't think there's too many. It's been a long time since I lived in Wisconsin.
I understand.
I took the Romulus job in Detroit when I was. Yeah, I don't even want to get into the years. It's been almost 25 years since I lived in Wisconsin. It's been a long time. So
I understand.
There's not too many people that remember me back there, I don't think. But it was fun to get back there to Camp Randall and watch Alabama roll over them. We look good that game.
You put together a roster that may be the preseason #1 team in America.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we plugged all the holes. You know, we needed some rim protection. Didn't really have great rim protection last year, and really added 2 guys to help fix that problem. You know, obviously Cliff, maybe the best returning big in the country for defensively, for sure. I think he is. You know, he's got unbelievable timing. He's got 7'6" wingspan. He gets off the ground quick. He can really protect the rim. But I think we're already seeing him evolve offensively. He's very athletic, very coachable. He's a great kid. And that's the thing with all these kids. They're actually unbelievably great kids. Like, with as much talent and as highly rated as they are, sometimes you may think that you get a little bit of arrogance and stuff that comes with that. I haven't seen any of that really with this group. So, you know, not only are they good players, but they're good people. But, you know, you add Cliff and then Aiden Sherrill, 7-footer. The 2 of those guys together are going to give us some real rim protection. You know, we needed to add some shooting to the mix to kind of help Sears and Trelly. And, you know, I think Chris Youngblood was player of the year in a really good conference, in the American Conference. Like that, it's tough to do, and he completely turned Kennesaw State around and then won at a high level at South Florida, and he's the reason they were winning at both those places. And you can tell just with his leadership, his competitiveness, he's made other guys better already. So we had, him and Houston both are great competitors, great leaders, and can really shoot it. We added some guard play in Holloway, McDonald's All-American. He can really shoot it like those other guys. But, we lost Estrada. I think, Aiden Holloway can step into a similar role. I think he might actually shoot it better than Aaron. He's not quite as big. He's got to get a little bit better on defense, we know. But he's been really good in practice, better than what I thought he was going to be. And then we added some freshmen that I think can really, and it depends on game to game and how they come along, but they can really help us. I mentioned Aiden Strell already, but, Nas Cunningham's got unbelievable length and athleticism. I think everybody should show up for the dunk contest because I have no idea what he's going to pull out, but some of the dunks in live play have been pretty ridiculous. And Darion Reed, same thing. He go to the rim, he's physical, he's tough, he shoots it well. And then LeBaron Phelan's been way better than I thought he was going to be. And he's a highly rated kid, but he's going to be right in the mix with all those guard minutes because he plays both sides of the ball. He's kind of more of a combo than even what I thought. He can really handle it. He's tough. There's not a whole lot he's missing. So, we've got the most depth I think we've ever had since we've been here, and it's a luxury. It's also a problem because you got to figure out minutes. But I think we've got great kids that are all about winning. So I think they'll help me figure the minutes out and be good teammates. Show a lot of Mudita, if you will, that we kind of stole from Coach Murphy. So I'm excited. I think everybody will love seeing our, the first look at them that night, that October 11th, and shoot. And then we've got 2 exhibitions this year too that are pretty good. We've got the one at Boutwell up in Birmingham against Wake Forest, which will be great. That'll be the first time anybody gets to see us against somebody else. And then we go play Memphis up in Huntsville. And so, it's a little different. Before they used to just play the non-Division I exhibitions and kind of roll over them. These are 2 high major teams that we're going to play live, in different places in the state. So I like what we've got going here before we actually get to a real game. I think Charlie can speak to it too, but we've got a special team, and we know it. We've got the returners like Charlie, who's been great, that are back. We've got some really good transfers in to help that got experience, and then we got some super talented freshmen. They all got great attitudes. They've all been working their tails off, and I wouldn't miss anything you can possibly be at this season because it's going to be a special season. Like you said, we're preseason number 1 by some people. We're going to be top 5, pretty much everybody out there. We've got an unbelievable schedule. We're going to get tested, but we're going to also we're going to play the type of basketball that they're going to want to support and want to be at. So let's fill Coleman every time we get a chance to fill Coleman. Let's make sure we're pulling for us when we're on the road and get a steady, we've got some really true fans that want to go on the road with us, and let's just support this team because it's not that often that you get to put a team of this caliber together, and we're going to go after as much as we can possibly go after this year.
It's my fault for not bringing it up. We'll have more time later, but new practice facility, everything that's exciting about the program, a lot of things taking place. Latrell Wrightsell, great to see you. Good luck this year. Coach Nate Oats, appreciate you so much. Great to see you again.
Half the best backcourt in the country right here. You're
coached by the best coach in the country.
Yes, sir.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see this year.
That's my pick anyway. Coach, thank you very much for the time.
Friends, check out Game Day Done Right, because there's one thing we can really all agree on. No one wants to be the last one left at a tailgate at the end of the game, having to do all the cleanup, all the breakdown while their friends are out celebrating. If you've been in this situation before, you know the true value in what the team at Game Day Done Right provides. They handle the entire process for you, from setup to breakdown. Stellar customer service on game days to make sure your group is taken care of from start to finish. All you have to do is visit GameDayDoneRight.com, reserve your tailgate package, and let their team take it from there. Can't wait for Alabama basketball to return. Men's and women's basketball getting going in less than 50 days here in Tuscaloosa. Fun with Nate Oats last night at Hey Coach and the Kalen DeBoer Show. No football game coming up this week, but that doesn't mean we're not busy here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Let's take a look at our upcoming schedule. Well, coming up tomorrow, there will be a new episode of Tide TV This Week, getting you caught up not just on Alabama football, but all the success we've seen for Alabama athletics over the past week, and also not just women's golf, but cross country, some success there as well. So we'll catch you up on our TV affiliates, plus on demand, RolledTide.com, and the Alabama Athletics YouTube channel. And then coming up on Monday, Corey Reamer and I will be in Vestavia Hills at Baumhauer's at 6 p.m. for Crimson Tide Rewind presented by the Alabama Department of Public Health, as we'll look back at the first 3 games of the year, and really that's going to be more of a preview show for Alabama against Georgia. We'll keep talking about Alabama and Georgia on next Tuesday's edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR, as we have that show for you each and every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 o'clock here on the CTSN social media platforms. And as I mentioned before, Hey Coach and the Kalen DeBoer Show comes back next Wednesday as well, with Coach DeBoer in person, getting you ready for Alabama against Georgia. Make sure you follow us on all of our social media platforms for some interview clips, some radio highlights from the booth cam presented by Yay Alabama. All of that can be found at UA_CTSN. That's going to do it for this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. Huge thank you to our guest, Nate Oats from last night at Hey Coach, and also Larry McReynolds, Christian Miller. We love getting their thoughts on Alabama football, especially really appreciate them taking some time during the open date to discuss what they've seen from the Crimson Tide so far this season and what's still ahead. Thank you to our video producer, Ethan Carabin. He put this entire show together. Thanks to all of you for watching. For all of us here at the network, I'm Roger Hoover. Thank you for the time you've given us. Now enjoy this open date. There's still some Alabama volleyball in Tuscaloosa. Soccer, of course, returns on Saturday. It'll still be busy on campus, but rest up and get ready, because next week when we talk, we're going to be talking about Georgia. We're going to be talking about SEC football for the Crimson Tide. But until then, have a great weekend. Roll Tide, everyone.